Hi, my name is Lauren, and today we're going to investigate some data and make some visualizations in Tableau. So anytime that I do a video like this, the data that we use is going to be public data that you can go download for yourself. Today, we're going to be looking at a data set from Austin Animal Shelter, which is a municipal shelter in Austin, Texas, that takes in a wide variety of animals, and they have made some of their intake data available to the public. And I will put a link in the description to where you can go find that data on the Austin government website. And I will also post a link to the data set that I used on the day that I downloaded this data set, in case you want to do exactly the same thing we're doing in this video. So on the screen is their website, and you can look there for more information about this shelter if you're interested. And we are going to get into Tableau. Okay, so once you connect to that data set in Tableau, and here I've also checked the cleaned with data interpreter box, because sometimes that can clean things up a little bit. And so once you have connected this data set and possibly checked that box, this should be what you see. So now we could look through and see what information we have in this file. We have information about the animal ID, the name potentially, the date and time of the intake, the month and year, the location from possibly where they were found, the type of intake, so things like stray or owner surrender, the condition the animal was in, type of animal, age, and so on. So you can look through here to get an idea of the information that you're working with. And so it would be nice to maybe create some visualizations for this data. So we're going to go over to sheet 1, and maybe a good first question would be, what are the types of animals that this shelter is getting with intakes? Maybe my first guess would be primarily dogs and cats, but we don't know. And so we could visualize how many of the different types of animals are coming in. So what we could do is in columns, if I go over on the left here, I could choose animal type, and I could drag that over to columns. And I want to put in the values of those different types. So here, this gives us an idea. If I scroll over, there are a little under 86,000 dogs that were intakes during this period of time, and I believe that the data that we have begins toward the end of 2013 up until when I downloaded it, which was in, I think, August of 2023, so over this time period, and we get an idea of these different types of animals. And so primarily dogs and cats, significantly more dogs than cats, and this gives us a nice little visualization here. So that's great. And maybe we want to focus in on dogs and cats. So we maybe want to look at the intake of dogs and see how that has changed over time. So if I guess I should be naming everything that I do here. So maybe at the top, I will add in a title for this first sheet. It looks like my computer is taking a minute to decide if it's ready to do that. There we go. So you could give this some title, maybe Austin Animal Center intakes from October, and I believe it starts October 1st, 2013 to the present at the time of this video. Like I said, I believe I downloaded this in August or September of 2023. So we could change that title. I would probably want to label this vertical axis with number of animals or something like that. And we could also reorder the things on this axis if we wanted to. We could order things from smallest to largest. I'd do that by clicking on the left here and say click that middle option, sort from largest to smallest, or I can drag around the different categories to change which shows up where. So now let's go to a second sheet and let's maybe look and see how the number of dog intakes changes over time. So let's see, let's look at our date, and I'm going to drag the date into columns, and I'm going to drag the animal type into rows, but I don't want all of the animal types, so I'm going to add a filter to this animal type. I'm going to drag and drop it into filters, and I'm going to unselect everything except dog. So I only want to be focusing in on dogs. So this is great, but this doesn't show us how the number of dogs is changing. This just has a row for dog. So what we really want to be doing is counting the number of dogs. So what we can go down to is measure under animal type, and we can choose count. There we go. This is showing us in each of these years the count of dogs at intake. But we might want a more kind of refined image of what's going on. So maybe instead of just looking at years, maybe it would give us a better picture if we looked month by month over this time period to see what's happening. So if I go up to this year, date, time, instead of year, let's go down to the option that lets us show the month and the year. If we choose that, this gives us kind of a better image over this time period of the number of dogs, dog intakes over this time period. So we can see the change by month throughout each year, and we can also see this large drop. Let's see, February, March, April of 2020. That looks like it probably corresponds to the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so this gives us kind of a closer look at the number of dog intakes over this time period. And so we could label this number of dog intakes, and we could include the time period if we wanted. Great. Well, maybe we want to do the same thing for cat intakes. Maybe we want to see what that looks like. So what we could do is go down, right now we're in sheet 2. Ideally we'd want to give these sheets names, like here, if I double click and say rename, this is dog intakes. If I want to look at cat intakes, I could duplicate this sheet. So if I double click and duplicate, and I'm going to change this, so I'm going to rename it to be cat intakes. So now, instead of my filter selecting dog, I want it to look at cats. So I can choose edit filter, and I want to look at cats instead of dogs. Well, this is interesting. So we can see what's happening as we go through the months in any year with the number of cat intakes. And I should change my title to be cat intakes, since that's what this is showing. And this is interesting, but this might be the kind of thing that we would expect. So cats, I believe, typically go into heat when it's warmer outside. And so you might have heard this referred to as kitten season, when there are many more kittens that shelters often have to care for and deal with during generally the summer months or months when it's warmer. Depending on where you live, this might be a different period of time, or if it's somewhere that's warm year-round, there might be multiple kitten seasons. But a lot of places in the United States deal with a kitten season in the warmer months, when these cats who are not fixed are going into heat and having kittens. And so there is this kind of cyclical pattern in the number of cat intakes, which my first guess would be related to kitten season for cats and having more kittens during the warmer times of the year. And we could see if these peaks do seem to be in typically warm times of the year, and it looks to me like they are. So this is in Texas, which does generally get warmer over the summer, and it looks like that might be what's playing a role here. Again, we haven't done the research into why these things are happening, but this might be the sort of thing that we might expect. So that's great. We've looked at dog intakes and cat intakes. So we could look back at other information we had in our data. Let's see, we have the date and time of intake, month and year, the location, intake type, intake condition, sex upon intake, age upon intake, lots of other things that we could look at. Maybe let's just look at sex upon intake. So they have information about whether the animal was male or female, and if they were intact, or if they were spayed or neutered. And so let's go over and create a new sheet, and let's look at sex upon intake. So I'm going to drag that into rows, and I'm going to put measure values in columns. So just looking at a bar chart the other direction. So let's see, some of these were null. We could exclude this. I'm going to go ahead and do that for now and just look at these other categories. And I can click on this axis and order from greatest to smallest. And so we can get an idea of how many intact males are coming in. So intact male and intact female were the most common categories. And we could, if we wanted to, we could filter this by animal type. So maybe I just want to look at dogs and see the status of these incoming dogs. So if I drag over animal type into filters, oh, let me try to do that again. There we go. And I can choose dog. And that gives me an idea of how many intact males there are, intact females, and then it also shows how many neutered males and spayed females are coming in. Also, a small portion of these are unknown. And so you could break this down by year to get an idea of what's happening. So this is great. This is another thing that we can look at. Some of the other things that we could look at were, let's see, we had breed. This might get a little bit tricky. We could create a visualization here, but a lot of these, if we're looking at dogs, a lot of these are mixes, and so there might be a lot of categories. Here there's Labrador Retriever mix, and so it might not be totally clear if we should be combining categories or keeping them separate, but that's something else that we could do. Let's see, I think we also have intake condition. That might be something to look at. So if I go and add a new worksheet, and I could choose intake condition, maybe I'll make that rows again, and then we can put in measure values here, and that will look at the count in each of these categories. And so again, we could maybe order these from greatest to smallest if we wanted, and we could add filters by the animal type, or even the breed, or the age. So let's do type again. And let's again choose dog. And this shows us how many were coming in that were normal, injured, sick. Something we could do is we could add a filter to our measure values and say, maybe I only want to show things that are, let's see, at most, maybe I could put in 500. And then it will just show the intake conditions that had less than 500. And so we could, again, order these and look at those different categories and the number in those different categories. And so this can be helpful to get an idea of what's happening with your data set. And so you could look at, let's see, we've looked at intake condition. Maybe next we could look at intake type. And I know if I was doing this to share with someone or even to keep for myself, I would want to be labeling everything so I was keeping track of what I was doing and being clear. But if I make a new worksheet, maybe instead of intake condition, I want to look at intake type. And maybe to mix it up, this time let's put the type in the columns and we can make a vertical bar chart. So now let's put measure values in the rows, and this shows us the different types of intakes that we had. So if I do this from largest to smallest, it shows us how many were strays and how many were owner surrenders and so on. And right now this is showing us all animals, so it's including wildlife, dogs, cats, livestock, it's including everything. And so if I wanted to narrow in on just dogs or just cats or something like that, I would, again, like we've been doing, drag animal type into my filter and just choose maybe dogs, and then get an idea of the intake type at this shelter for just dogs. And something else that we could do is I could drag the date time up into pages up here, and this would let me see what's happening at different times. So this is right now set to 2013, so maybe I want to then change this and see what happened in 2018 and what the status was there, or maybe in 2020. And I just want to be able to easily change between different years and see how this changes. And so these are some ways that we could quickly visualize some of the things in this data set to better understand what's happening, which is great. Okay. So since we've been talking about Austin Animal Center, I always appreciate data that's available for us to use, and especially real data sets that we can use to understand what's happening. And I appreciate this being shared publicly. And since we've been talking about a specific shelter, I just wanted to put up more of their website. They have resources if you are in the area, services that are available to you, along with other resources for the community that they've made available. I will put this link in the description, but I just wanted to mention this. And they also have a place where you can donate financially if it's something that you're interested in and able to do. I just wanted to put those there so that you know that they're there in case you're interested in any of those resources or interested in donating. And so thank you for watching this video. I hope you had some fun playing with Tableau and using it to understand how to answer some questions you might have about a data set.